Hard to imagine nowadays, but 50,000 years ago, a gigantic ice sheet covers the state of New Hampshire, making it as flat and featureless as the plains of Nebraska. But time changes things, both for the good and bad. And in the case of the White Mountains, for the beautiful. Back in 1858, few folks see these mountains the way you and I do today. Back then, no airplanes fly, no GPS figures things out for them, no National Geographic photographs show them their wonderful world. Back then, folks live where they live, see what they see, and that is that. Until a man named Sylvester Marsh comes down with a stomachache that will not go away. Or so the story goes. And it's an amazing story worth telling, with as many twists and turns in it as a pretzel, and just as salty, with characters sprinkled here and there along the way who are just as determined as Mr. Marsh not to build a railroad around or through a mountain. Heck, anybody can do that. But to build one that climbs up through the clouds, clear to the top. Well, now that's a story worth telling. Not only how they did it back then, but how they're still doing it today. First things first, some folks claim Sylvester Marsh is crazy. Well, yes, like a fox, maybe. For that matter, anybody who's ever worked on the Cog Railway, from that first tree falling in the White Mountain Forest nearly a century and a half ago, all aboard! To the first train climbing up the summit this morning. The word crazy does apply, providing you add like a fox, because to face the forces of nature waiting for you each and every day on this mountain and not back down takes determination, cleverness, resilience, courage, and did I mention timing? Back then, Sylvester Marsh knows the good thing when he sees it coming over the horizon long before anybody else does.
The Cog Railroad was not built for mining, it was not built for logging, it was built for tourism.
Marsh's foresight comes from a powerful lot of hindsight learned the hard way. Growing up poor on a farm in New Hampshire, by 52 he makes a fortune in Chicago, so, rich and happy, he decides to retire and take it easy. Instead, Marsh gets bored with nothing much to do, until his stomach trouble starts up. Otherwise known as dyspepsia, the malady leads him to seek a cure in the clean, fresh air of his boyhood, and to climb a mountain while he's at it, with a minister friend, Augustus Thompson, a climb neither one of them would ever forget.
So they stayed at the Crawford House, then they went for the hike up Mount Washington. And as they got, say, halfway up, the weather changed dramatically. It can happen to anybody by surprise. So they decided to continue. It became dark and freezing and hailing, and it was horrendous. And they, of course, got lost. And so they stumbled into the Tip Top House and survived. And Sylvester decided what he would tackle is try to make the mountain more accessible for visitors, safer.
A cog locomotive is like nothing you've ever seen, unless you've been climbing Mount Washington lately. Wheels, yes. Pistons, yes. But a cogwheel in the middle that grips a ladder track and won't let go, that is Sylvester Marsh's secret ingredient.
If you look at a bicycle, the chain and sprocket, Think of the rack in the middle of the railroad, okay, between the other two rails. Think of that as the chain on the bicycle. And the sprocket is the cog gear on the locomotive. The difference there is that the chain goes around the sprocket. Here, the cog goes up the chain.
By 1867, thanks to Marsh's hard-working team, a mile of track rises above the base station, and to climb it is a funny-looking, vertical boilered steam locomotive named Hero. The 4th of July comes a day early to the Mount Washington Cog Railway when it opens for business on July 3rd, 1869. Not much has changed on Mount Washington for millions of years, but for the little railroad that still climbs it, an awful lot has changed since 1869, when Sylvester Marsh started things rolling.
The engine pushing us up the mountain, we build our own engines. This one is the M2. It's the second of the 5 biodiesels that we built. The average grade on the Cog Railway is 25%, with the steepest grade being up on Jacob's Ladder of 37.41% grade. There's a place where I stand up on the coach on the way up on Jacob's Ladder, where I actually put my feet 1 foot inside the coach in the doorway. And when I stand up straight in the doorway, my head is actually a foot outside the coach. At that point, the seats on the uphill end of the coach are usually 14 feet higher in elevation than the seats on the other end of the coach.
All journeys begin with a single step, and just as ours began with the chuff of a historic steam engine, nowadays it starts with a mighty roar as the Mount Washington Cog Railway biodiesel digs in for the final push to the top.
The real advantage to biodiesel is that it's the only EPA-designated advanced biofuel produced in the country. It reduces emissions by 80% from conventional diesel.
It does something that steam trains couldn't do. It gets you up the mountain faster. The running time is shorter. There's no real delays along the way. And the passengers, with the windows are open in the coaches, they're not bombarded with cinders from the start. Believe me, I'm a disciple of steam engines, but I'm also a realist.
You can't argue with success, and our ridership has continued to increase since we brought on the biodiesel locomotives, and they're what customers today expect in terms of an experience, so they're great.
As far as the differences between the diesels and the steam engines, of course, first of all, the steam engines go through about a ton of coal per trip, and the diesels can do it for less than 18 gallons a trip. Secondly, we have a crew of 1 in the cab, since we don't need a fireman. All we have is an engineer. In the steam engines, of course, you have 2. Steam engine, you have an engineer and fireman.
The steam train takes about an hour to get home. Biodiesel even faster, but both of them are traveling back in time along the way, back to when it all began, with determined people working hard to make their dreams come true. The people who take you down the mountain and back up again, if you've got the urge to do so, are just regular folks. Except for one small difference. You're along for the ride, and it's a great one. But the Coggers, they're here to stay, and they have been ever since that first tree fell in the White Mountain forest and Sylvester squinted his eyes in wonder at what was waiting for him and the world when the Mount Washington Cog Railway started climbing to the clouds.